Hey folks, this is Jake Davis, and today I actually want to talk about something very serious with you. Excuse my daughter and the dog in the background, but something happened last night that was very serious and really should be addressed, and I feel I had to talk about it. Uh, Robert Pattinson was cast as Batman. Now, clearly, it's a very painful thing. I'm still trying to cope with it myself. But when I woke up this morning and I couldn't hear the birds. No food had no taste. The sun gave no warmth. Uh, so to try to cope with this tragedy in a cathartic way, I've decided to go through other truly atrocious casting decisions in movie history. By this, I'm gonna address when guys were like, or people were cast were really what the hell casting decisions, but were they made it work. Not every bad casting decision was a disaster. But when, you're trying to get people excited about your film and that first piece of casting announcement comes out and the instant reaction is, huh? It's not a good thing. So, I'm going to run through some of these. I got a lot of ones I wrote down, so I'm just going to, might not say them all. Uh, First off, I just want to address the, Michael Keaton. When Michael Keaton was first cast as Batman in 1988, uh, a lot of people didn't get it. I mean, they thought thought of him as a comedic actor. They also kind of think of him as kind of, pretty scrawny. But, when he got the part, he nailed it. But then you got to the Schumacher movies of the Batman films. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger seemed like he could have been a good choice for Mr. Freeze, but didn't really work. It was still kind of perplexing. Chris O'Donnell was, of course, far too young, and Alicia Silverstone was way, way too obvious of a choice. Nev Campbell, Sarah Michelle Gellar were young actors at the same time would have been better choices. They could actually act. Uh, uh, when Jesse Eisenberg was cast as Batman, as Lex Luthor, a lot of people were just, what the hell? And his whole style was like, I mean, I appreciate it. I said before, I appreciate how he did his own thing with it, but at the same time, it was almost too out there, too weird, and people just didn't like it. It's not like what I want from Luthor. I didn't completely hate it like a lot of people, but they could have done something cooler with Luthor. Imagine if a Vin Diesel would have played Lex Luthor. Even I know he's kind of old, but Billy Zane was who I really always kind of saw as Lex Luthor, especially while watching the show as a kid. Uh, Take your pick for guys who played Robin Hood. I was gonna say Kevin Costner, but then I started thinking of Taron Egerton last year's movie, which was just atrocious, a god awful piece of shit. And I mean that guy. I'm sorry, Kingsman wasn't a bad movie, but I find it's hard enough for me to believe that guy is an adult. He's so damn short and got such a baby face. Nah, as an action hero, as Robin Hood, no, screw that. Uh, I would say something about David Harbour as Hellboy, but the box office spoke for that. Tilda Swinton was one of the few controversial choices coming from the MCU. I mean, I thought that she did good in the film. She's a good performance. It's a good movie and everything. Great movie. But, I mean, it would have been cool to see Jet Li play that part. Jet Li would have been awesome. Eric Bana as the Hulk was really confusing one for me, too, because, I mean, uh, they cast a guy who looks like the Hulk before he turns instead of looking like Bruce Banner. Didn't make sense to me. Which is the same thing with Michael Chiklis. You cast a guy who already kind of looks like the Thing instead of trying to get someone who looks like Ben Grimm did in the comics. Michael Cera was kind of a controversial casting decision as Scott Pilgrim, mainly because the guy who wrote the comics kind of hated him. Hated him. He thought Scott Pilgrim was supposed to be kind of a ladies' man and a Joe Cool, and Michael Cera doesn't come off as cool. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Jack Black and Adrian Brody both in King Kong. I mean, did they just say, go fuck these characters? I mean, why even bother with doing King Kong if they had such a negative attitude towards the character and the time, and really kind of like that movie? Like any reference or homage to the old film is kind of like a looking down, shaking their head at it kind of joke. Uh, Keanu Reeves, Jesus Christ. Keanu Reeves first I love Keanu Reeves as John Wick, but, I mean, he's a horrible choice for Constantine, and he was a horrible choice for Jonathan Harker. So there's two really, really bad choices he was. Hell, for that matter, Winona Ryder was a bad choice for Mia Harker, too. I didn't like Gary Oldman in the role, but I understand why they wanted him. In all honesty, Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger was a controversial. People did not get it when he was cast as the Joker. He had to win him over with, the performance and, unfortunately, tragedy. I've never been able to get through Anne Rice's interview with the vampire. But I know fucking Antonio Banderas was a horrible choice for Armand. And he's not really good in the movie either. Probably the worst casting decision in movie history, as far as, if you haven't noticed, I'm trying to stick to, characters from literature or comic books, not real people and not stuff from, original stories, original films. I'm, rocking back and forth a lot here. Rosie O'Donnell as Betty Rubble is probably the worst casting decision in fucking movie history. It was atrocious. Who greenlit that? Who thought that was a good idea? And I mentioned the Thing, but that was the whole thing with the Fantastic Four. For the exception of Chris Evans as Johnny Storm in the first films, and Kate Mara as Sue Storm in the 2015 reboot. Everyone else in the cast was just a terrible, terrible choice. I thought Michael B. Jordan was just a stunt. I didn't like him in the performance, and his character, his version of Johnny Storm came off more as obnoxious, as bitter. Their Ben Grimm was way screwed up, and Jamie Bell was just boring. Miles Teller didn't do a bad job playing Reed Richards, but, he was far too young, Reed Richards, not an interesting age to come into that character's life for me. And, more importantly, I don't like, both with Owen Grufford and Miles Teller, they didn't cast a guy who, looked smart. You know what I mean? Gave off that brainy kind of appeal. Reed Richards, of course, both famous Reed Richards, great. God forbid they cast a mature scientist-age guy that has that, that prestige and that respectability about him. And as far as Miles Teller, I think Miles Teller is terrific in Whiplash, but most movies, when I see him, I just can't get past, what the fuck happened to your face? I know it's terrible, it's a rude thing to ask, but I can't get past it. What the fuck happened to this guy's face? That's not normal. That's not what a face looks like. Anyhow, I digress. That's kind of mean. Ezra Miller was a strange choice for the Flash, and even though he wasn't bad in Justice League, he was funny. I still don't really get why they got him, why they went that direction. Why they made. He's not even really like Wally West was in the comics. He's Barry Allen, but I always figured they'd make him more like Wally West to be comic relief. But he's more like Spider-Man than even that character, so that was really weird. Jake Gyllenhaal as the Prince of Persia is just kind of explains itself. What the fuck was that all about? Andrew Garfield I always thought was a horrible choice for Spider-Man. For that matter, Kirsten Dunst was never really a good choice for Mary Jane Watson. Even though Mary Jane, she had her moments. I'd like Mary Jane's arc in Spider-Man 3. Never really warmed up to Kirsten in the role. And I just never liked anything about the Garfield films. And for that matter, Topher Grace, playing Venom ruined his career, really. And I thought, he did a lot better than anybody gives him credit for, or anybody expected he would. Robert Downey Jr. Say what you would about Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes. He was terrific in that movie. That's a really excellent film. But the sequel is who gives a shit. I don't give a shit about they doing a third one at all. Sequel sucked. And more importantly, I just can't get past him. He's just not a good choice for Sherlock Holmes. Even though the movie's fine. It's really, really fun as hell. But, Jude Law. to me, could have just played both roles. I know that's ridiculous, but he was great as Dr. Watson, and I think he would have been a good Sherlock Holmes. It's kind of weird a guy could have played both parts, but I guess that makes sense. One I feel I should definitely mention, even though I've never seen the film, and and it is a real guy. Kevin Spacey as Bobby Darin. He cast himself as a guy. I mean, he was like a decade older than Bobby Darin ever lived to be, if not more so. That was just a ridiculous vanity project. Hey, get out of that, dog. Excuse me. Just a ridiculous vanity project, and it's really shameful. Jai Courtney as John Connor in Terminator was also buffoonish. Jamie Kennedy, look, if you couldn't have gotten Jim Carrey to come back for The Mask, just shouldn't have done it. I've never been able to get through Sound of the Mask, and Jamie Kennedy is why. Also, someone else's career was never recovered. Another one of them, up there with Rosie O'Donnell, has got to be Vince Vaughn for Norman Bates in the Psycho remake. If you've never seen that, do not do that to yourself. No matter what you've done, you don't deserve that. Do not put yourself through that. William Fichtner as Shredder in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was such a ridiculous backlash to that. So bad casting that they ended up shooting everything with just a stand-in as Shredder. But look, I don't care. He was cast as Shredder. That still counts. And of course, a couple more of these I have to mention. Probably the worst ones on here. The top, as far as other than the obvious all-time ones. I gotta point out the trilogy here of nonsense. Seth Rogen as the Green Hornet, Johnny Depp as Tonto, and Sam A. Jones as Flash Gordon. Now, Jones is the one that could be forgiven because he was just a guy looking to get into the movies and wanted to play Flash Gordon, a high-profile role, and after the success of Superman, who wouldn't have jumped at it? But Seth Rogen and Johnny Depp, these motherfuckers virtually cast themselves in these roles. Seth Rogen wrote and produced the film. I mean, Jesus Christ, and both of them were in development hell for years. And quite frankly, I hope Johnny Depp's career never recovers from The Lone Ranger, because as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't deserve to. There's no excuse for fucking that up the way they did. Anyhow, I didn't mention all the ones that I wrote down because I said I wrote a shitload here. I hope y'all enjoyed this insane rant. I had to get through the pain and suffering of Robert Pattinson. Look, now, I understand. Look, Robert Pattinson was probably pushing 30. I'm not exactly sure how old he is. But he's probably old enough, mature enough. He's dapper and tall. And I'm sure if he put on the weight, he could bulk up, no problem. But he's going to have that stink of Twilight. I mean, yeah, Twilight was 7 years ago, but I have not seen anything he's been in since. I avoided that Cronenberg movie, even though, I'll usually check out Cronenberg just for the sake of weirdness. But I also skipped that film, Good Time, just because he was the star. Am I going to go out and seek it just for that? No. But as of right now, I'm not cool with this. I think it sucks. I think it's a bad move. However, Matt Reeves is a good director. I've enjoyed every film of his I've seen, and his last 2 films were absolutely amazing. 5-star masterpieces. So, and those were action movies too. So, I don't know. I'm just, not optimistic, but, as a fanboy, I'm bloodbound to the Batman. I have to see it. I don't want to see it. Just like the upcoming Joker movie. The reason I haven't really talked about that in my videos is because I half assumed I actually thought it was a fake film until the trailer came out a few months ago. Anyhow, I hope y'all enjoyed this rant. I hope y'all are getting through this better than me. I'm just joking. Anyhow, I'm Jake Davis, and I'll catch you on the fly.